Good afternoon. The Committee of the Whole is called to order, but we will return to recess until we reach a quorum. Thank you very much. We're still on recess. Committee of the Whole is called to order. We will continue on now with second round. We're on round two, my colleagues. We left off of Senator Duenas. We will now proceed to Senator Torres. A reminder to my colleagues, if you have any amendments, please start forwarding that to the clerk so we can have it loaded up. Senator Torres, I know you have an amendment on when we get to third round. Senator Torres, you have any questions for the panel at this time? And you can speak about your possible amendment if you want as you're talking to the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will. I don't have any questions, but the last time we left off, I did have some concerns about one section, and I was able to to draft an amendment which has been forwarded to the clerk. So we'll take up that amendment when we go to the third round. So at this time, I don't have any further questions.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Torres.
Yes, the amendment is going to be to Section 4, and that's essentially to clarify language and to add in a reference to the subsequent section that I thought needed to be also reinforced in the language. So it does have to do with Section 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Nelson's not here. We will proceed. Sergeant Arm, do you know if Senator Nelson's on her way back? Or okay, please check. Do a short recess. Hopefully, she might be in the parking lot. We'll allow her to come in, because once we pass, any of my colleagues would. It's done. And like I advised my colleagues earlier, Speaker Therese won't be in, and she advised me she has no question for second round, but she does have a proposed amendment. Okay, so just a real short recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. My colleagues, Senator Nelson has no questions at this time, but she does have an amendment that will be coming up on the third round. That's when she'll be speaking also on the portion of comments and and amendment. Now we now move to Senator Parrish. Do you have any questions for the panel?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So a question about, this is to OFB. Actually, maybe Director Byrne. So would the group health insurance costs increase for fiscal year 2023, or will it be the same?
There is a potential cost increase.
Okay. How much would you estimate that to be?
In percentage terms, and I need to be really careful because we've not quite got through the procurement process yet, but it's somewhere between 10 and 15%.
Okay. Has the substitute bill accounted, so this question for OFB, has the substitute bill accounted for this potential increase?
Senator, when we developed the FY23 budget, I believe the health negotiations were still in progress. They were still meeting, and that what we budgeted for the appropriations for the health coverage, I believe is, I think, slightly higher. Just give me 1 second. What is the health? Go to the health for retirement. Oh. Yeah. Yes, I think we increased it slightly. So, but we did increase it, right? Where's 22? This is 22? Yeah. Yes, Senator. Again, going back to the appropriation for the retirement health, dental and life, we did increase the FY22 appropriation level in over FY22 by $3 million in anticipation of that increase.
So how much did you increase it by compared to the 2022? If you can repeat that number again.
$3 million.
$3 million.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So a question for OFB. So in the Public Law 36-106, can you explain, so basically what happened with that bill was there was an increase in revenues. Do you recall the amount the increase was compared to Public Law 36-54?
Yes. The total increase, Senator, between the authorized FY22 as passed in Public Law 3654 and that what was the total adjusted appropriation in Public Law 36106 amounted to about $54.9 million.
Okay, so the you're subtracting which numbers? What can you just rehash? What are the numbers you're using to get that number 54?
We took the adjusted revenue level of $678 million and subtracted that by the current appropriation Public Law 3654 of the $623 million.
Okay, Okay, so 678 minus 623?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I need to follow up with a question earlier. Department of Administration, Director Byrne. So when you said you estimate the cost to be 10 to 15% more, 10 to 15% more of what number are you referring, or what number are you referring to?
I was just referring to a general cost.
So what is the cost, original cost that you're basing that 10 to 15% off?
Well, I have to answer that question in two ways, right? Because the cost appears all over the place. It appears in autonomous agencies, it appears in special funds, it appears in, federal funds too. An estimate of the amount that is covered by the general fund, which is what this budget is trying to address, is about 42 million.
Okay, so you're saying 10 to 50% of the 42 million you
Yes,
expect?
but that's a really round number because it affects different groups and categories differently.
Okay, so that could be 4.2 million, then you're saying it might be 4.2 million to,
It might be 4.2 to like
Okay.
5.5 million.
okay,
So it sounds like Mr. Guerrero's estimate is in a reasonable ballpark to me.
okay, thank you. For Steve, Mr. Guerrero, so going back to the question about the adjusted revenues for fiscal year 2022, can you account for the costs that was used, or how was that increase used? If you can account or itemize those costs.
The breakdown of the 54.9, Senator, comprised of the $26,381,000 we set aside for the GPA tax credit. It also included the 15% rainy day million that we reserved for the rainy day fund.
Is that 15 million?
15 million, yes. Plus 13.6 million that we set aside for the 2% rainy day fund.
What about the liquid fuels tax? Was that included in it?
I
The
don't-
repeal or the moratorium?
If you're talking about what comprises of the 54.9 million,
Yes.
it does not include the liquid fuel tax. This is just the increase. We increased the revenues by.
Okay, so, but in a previous meeting, it was included. So that was part of what was included in that increase. There was, yeah, so it's not, doesn't seem to be aligned with what was presented before.
No, Senator, we are actually considering it, and it is appropriated because it's part of this 5 million appropriation that we did to Public Works and the 156,000 that we gave to Guam Regional Transit.
Okay, so just to clarify, so what was in that 54 million that was included in that Public Law 36106?
The same three items I just mentioned earlier, which was the 26,381,000 for the GPA tax credit program, the 15 million that we set aside for the rainy day fund, and the 13.6 million that we set aside for the 2% rainy day fund.
Okay, and so that 54 million, it came from surplus? Where did that 54 million, what is the source of the funding for that?
Those funds, Senator, came from the potential excess revenues that we anticipated for FY22.
Okay, and then right now, the excess revenues is at, what is our current?
Based on I believe, June CEO report, it's at around $99 million.
Okay. And so we're subtracting 54 million from that 99 million.
If you want to get a balance of the projected surplus, yes.
Okay. So then what money is used to pay for the moratorium on liquid fuels tax?
I don't quite understand your,
Yeah, because this, so the moratorium was passed after we passed the FY22 budget. So what money is paying for that? As well as the pharmaceutical fund and the GRTA portion?
yeah. The 13, Senator, remember in the FY22 budget, the 2% rainy day fund that we appropriated and at the same time we suspended was already part of the budget. It's already part of what we allocated. The $5 million that we appropriated to Public Works in 36105 and to the Guam Regional Transit Authority of 156 was part of that revenue. We can consider it as part of the revenues, part of the 13 million.
Okay, so you're using the rainy day portion to pay for that?
In effect, if we were going to consider, yes, all the appropriation, yes, we did consider that. And we are using the rainy day fund. So that 13 million that basically we set aside, or supposedly was supposed to be set aside, and what I'm hearing that people think it's floating, the actual balance of that should actually be only 8.4.
Okay. All right. Okay, question for Director Shimizu. Can you confirm the number of BPT filers currently?
We have approximately 15,000 BPT filers.
As far as businesses, though, how many businesses?
So with regards to business licenses, we usually have in the range around 20,000 business licenses. But of course, some of those, how you file BPT is based on your GRT account number. So a single taxpayer can have multiple business licenses. For example, a single organization can have a retail license, they can have a rental license, they can have a service license, but that particular licensee will have a single GRT account number and will file a single GRT form for all of their activities. So although we have about or over 20,000 licensees, we have only about 15,000 BPT filers.
Okay, thank you. In looking at the revenue collections for BPT, what conclusions can you say? So we received documents from 2020 to 2022. What can you say about, are there any trends worth noticing?
I'm sorry, would you please restate your question?
Yes, so in, basically in the documents that were provided to the body, it showed, it itemized the different, I guess there was, basically it itemized the different types of filers, right? So there's rental, real property, insurance premiums, wholesaling, retailing, services and such. And so that was provided to the body for the past, from this current year, 2021 and 2020. Are there, in looking at those documents, are there any trends worth noting?
And I'm sorry, Senator, I don't have that same document
Okay.
that you're referring to.
Maybe we can have a quick recess to provide the documents.
I don't know what document that
I
is,
have
I'm sorry.
I made copies, so you can make copies. We'll take a brief recess. We're back from recess. Senator Perez. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, the question that I asked before we went on recess was, in looking at the historical performance of BPT and the different breakdown, was there anything of note that Director Shimizu can, does she see anything of note?
I'm sorry, Senator Perez, I know there's a lot of information here, so I mean, and the FY 2022 collections is still missing of course, the last 2 months worth of collections. But if we look at FY 2021 versus FY 2020, we see a little bit of a drop in the total BPT collections. That's one. It's difficult to tell category by category because, again, there's a lot of information here. If I had a little bit more time, I could probably do a little bit of an analysis, but it's difficult to tell. But I can say that, I mean, I do also have my own monthly BPT tracking and my annual BPT tracking based on the CRER that's prepared by BBMR. And what I can say is that the collections are pretty consistent with what we've been seeing for the last couple years, which is in the upper 200 million range. So that's really, at least at this time, that's the analysis that I have.
Okay, so perhaps maybe if you have more time to look at it, and I appreciate if you can give any more information on that.
Will do. Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, you know, if you look at the numbers, though, it seems like we're probably going to exceed what the current projection is for this budget bill. I mean, if we were to, like, if you look at it, it's like 29 million per month. So that would put us over the current projection of BPT. Okay. So in any case, I guess the other question I have for maybe Director Shimizu as well.
Right, and so Senator Wright, you are correct that if we hit an average of 28 to 29 million, we'll exceed the $302 million that's showing in the OFB column.
Okay. All right, so I want to turn, thank you. Was there anything else of note? No, okay. I wanted to turn to collections on use tax. So the OPA produced an audit that highlighted the undercollection of 60 million plus in use tax. And there were some recommendations that the auditor put out. One of them was DRT meeting with CQA on use tax assessment forms. Can you comment on that? What measures were done?
Sure. So with regards to use tax, and thank you for asking that, we actually did meet with Director Pareto just the other day to discuss the issue of use tax. But with regards to the audit itself, that particular audit, I believe, was specifically regarding the use tax or the what's coming in on air cargo. As you know, as you are aware, with regards to those products that are coming into our seaport, it is possible for the port to hold those products before the use tax is paid. With regards to those products that are coming from our airport, it is not possible for the airport, and again, there is a federal court case that actually sets precedence for that. With regards to the amount, and I don't recall the amount that was showing on the use tax audit, but one thing that we did discuss with the public auditor's team is that I don't believe that that amount takes into consideration any of the exemptions. It's a gross figure. So it also doesn't break down any amounts that may be exempted from use tax, for example, those products that may be coming in for government or for other exempted reasons. So that number, again, although it's quite high, there are items which could be probably deducted, or it could be where it could be reduced. We did talk with Director Pareto because with regards to what the process, and I just want to go through the process real quickly. What happens is when products come in to Guam, and Customs is able to work to collect those taxes from was able to get to the individual who's shipping the item to Guam. There is a Form UST that is generated, and that Form UST is actually filled out manually, And that Form UST is then transmitted to the Department of Revenue and Taxation for us to enter into our system so that we can either send a notice to collect the use tax if a use tax hasn't been paid, or we can indicate that it has been paid in the system. And so if the monies for the use tax are not collected at the time that the products are received, then DRT enters that into the system, and we again generate the notice so that we can work to collect those monies. And that's the process. Now, what we did talk, after the use tax audit did occur, of course, we did meet with Director Pareto, but we met with him again recently. And what he has advised is, because the process is really manual, they are working on obtaining a system at CQA so that way there is a better system of tracking these forms UST. Because again, what will happen is we will get a box of these manually filled out forms UST, and some of the challenges that we face are that the forms UST may not be complete. There are no social security numbers, EIN numbers. It's difficult to tell if it's perhaps John A. Cruz versus John B. Cruz, because again, they're not always completely filled out. And so we do have a challenge in collecting the use tax. In addition to that, as I mentioned, there's exemptions that are difficult to manage and administer because, again, there's a $5,000 personal exemption for individuals, which cannot be taken as in excess of $1,000 a month. But again, it's difficult to tell because that's from all sources, to include the seaport and also the post office, right, if you've paid. So with regards to that, I believe that the implementation of an actual system at CQA will help to help us so that way, again, the hope is we don't have to have a manual process because, again, we basically get manual forms and we enter them into the system so we can generate collection notices and we manually work to collect on that. In other jurisdictions, as I was talking to Director Pareto, usually there is a bit of a CQA and DRTs are somewhat more connected. I did travel to the CNMI and I was able to meet with the Director of Customs there and review their system, and their system is a bit different because their structure is different. How it works is the head of finance oversees the Department of Revenue and Taxation, Customs and Quarantine, and the equivalent of perhaps the Department of Administration. And the CQA agents are collection agents that have access to people's social security numbers and EIN numbers for businesses. So when a business goes to CQA, there is actually no paper, it's a fully electronic process. When they go to CQA to pick up their product and to pay for it's an excise tax, it's not called use tax there, they're able to pull up that individual or organization's EIN or social. They can tell if there's an outstanding balance, and they're at the point that they're receiving their product. You can tell again if they have an outstanding balance or not. And then 2 windows down, there's a treasurer who is able to collect or address any payment, I guess if there is a payment plan or some other type of avenue or tool that's needed in order to make sure that they're able to make payment. So it's a little bit different. And of course, there is a lot of things that we can, there's a lot of areas that can be, where we can find improvement. But I believe that the system that Customs is going to be working to get, and Director Pareto had advised that he believes that hopefully by the end of the year, they'll be able to complete the procurement for it, that, as I understand it, and that will be very, very helpful to us.
Thank you so much for that response. I guess another follow-up question. So in regards to passengers coming into Guam, is there a way to project use tax based on incoming passengers?
That's something, Senator, I've not looked at.
Okay.
I suppose we could look at whatever the experience is, but again, I'm not sure what Customs is, how they're able to track or how they track that data. So we would have to find out from them how that information is tracked and if it even exists before we can before we could use it in order to make some projections.
All right, thanks. Question for Mr. Guerrero. Regarding inflationary costs, has OFB looked into potential increase of the cost of government due to inflation?
If I understand your question correctly, are you saying that in our developing of the revenues that we consider cost of inflation?
More so the expenditures, so what the agencies put forth in their budgets.
Senator, when we derived at each department and agency's FY23 ceiling that we're recommending in the executive budget, we went back and looked at the expenditure trends of all the departments and see how they were performing in FY22 up to the day we established the ceilings for these agencies. We looked at the current expenditure trends that they were incurring in the agency, I believe, for the last 7 months, and looked at that as compared to how they were spending previously and what their appropriation level is this year. We projected out the remaining, I believe, 3 months or 4 months until the end of the fiscal year, considering that expenditure trend, and appropriated and came up with the ceilings by using that method.
So you said there was a savings based on historical data?
There are 11 departments that actually are receiving a lower appropriation in FY23 than that of FY22. So I would consider, yes, there is a savings there.
But some of them are actually due, so for instance, like Guam Solid Waste Authority, it's not, it's basically based on the revenues that they're receiving. So that I would probably, did you discount that one?
We would consider. I mean, if we looked at basically the trend, we looked at also the revenue sources that fund these agencies and took that into account. And that if the revenue, if the projection for the fund itself is lower than FY22, which also is dictated by the collections that's occurring this year and what we anticipate for next year, then that the reduction would have been done accordingly. We could not, I mean, even if the agency was telling me that they're, for example, they're operating at $1 million, but their fund is only coming, say, in 900,000, then we would have to, do a couple of things there. We can go back and look at their expenditure trends and see where they can cut, maybe 100,000, and or take other options, like we might have to subsidize them. For example, in this case, would be the general fund.
Yeah, I think that's kind of simplistic because just because their budget decreased, there are many different reasons for that. So like in the case of Guam Solid Waste Authority, it was more that they were receiving less revenue. But you were mentioning how you were looking at revenues. Does that include federal funding?
If it in fact, what we did is we consider all funds for the department, but when it comes to 100% federal, we don't normally include that in our estimate. We do include the local match because it does require local funds to be appropriated. So yes, those programs we do consider.
So I guess the question was that, did you track or at least investigate the effects of inflation on costs of government? Did you actually do that analysis?
What we normally do, Senator, at least in the government, at least all my time doing this budget is we do, one of the main things we take in consideration is trends. We look at the department, look at their trends and see how they're spending. And then we also look at what their request is. And if the request is something that's in line with what I believe is palatable and something that is required, we would try to also accommodate, that request. But many times when the agencies are requesting for funding, it's kind of like, sometimes a wish list. And as much as I personally would love to fund these agencies up to what they're asking, revenues dictate and say otherwise. So we need to kind of set the ceilings for them. But what we're trying to do is at least try to cover at least the mandated portions, those that we know that are annual fixed costs, And anything above them, we will try to negotiate and just say, this is how much we can give you. We may not be giving you all you're asking for, but this is how much we can afford to give you, maybe above your ceiling. And that's how we do it.
Yeah, I guess the thing too is the power costs, obviously, right? That's going to be increasing. Have you had an estimate of what that would be for the government?
Departments and agencies in their budget requests also indicate what the costs, what their additional costs would be in the next fiscal year. And what we normally do is we look at it, and if it says, if it's something like I said is reasonable and it is in line with what we know is going to happen, like the rate increases that are happening, we do consider that and we do budget for it as much as possible.
So then the increase in power was already budgeted for. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
With the incoming increases, that is.
as much as we could, yes.
Okay. All right, so thank you for that response. So another document that we have here is, it shows the Department of Defense construction, and it shows, I don't know if you have this copy?
This chart?
Yes, that
Yes.
one. So so basically it shows the peak workload in the mid of 2023, maybe towards actually 2024, more like it. How does this factor into revenue projections? So what have you identified, which funds would this greatly affect?
Yeah, my understanding, Senator, this particular graph is reflective only of BBT. If I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong. It's only representation of the BBT. So I would assume that, looking at the graph and the peaks that are happening, I see for the, U.S. Marine Corps, they're peaking at approximately 1.7 million by the middle of FY2023. We will look at the trends of what BBT has been collecting, and hopefully within that trend, it would be representation of this increase.
Have you looked at previous years to see if there was a trend prior? So, because this only shows from 2022, and it projects it out to 2029, but do we have any information prior to that?
In calculating the BBT, Senator, we do take prior years, past years, trends, and consider that as we estimate forward.
Okay. If you can provide that information, just to kind of see the correlation between those two revenue sources. So basically what I want to see is where are we going to see the increases in revenues?
Yeah, this graph, Senator, I believe is from Department of Defense, and I'm not too sure what this budget represents and who it's supposed to represent or where it's coming from. Maybe Lester can help me out if BBMR is the one that provided this. If not, then I'm not too sure exactly where this graph came from or who provided it.
That's called a SAND chart. Don't ask me what SAND stands for. I tried to look it up, but that's military jargon, so I couldn't tell you. But it came from the Department of Defense recently. I think this document is less than 1 month old. And I provided that to OFB. I also provided OFB with historical collections in contracting, which is a portion of BPT, and I think Mr. Guerrero has that 3 or 4 sheets for different fiscal years. And for the body's education, there are 2 contracting categories. One is local and one is U.S. And I believe, if I recall correctly, local is about $36 million and U.S. is about 24 in one particular year. So that's an annual contribution from contracting activity to BPT. And again, Mr. Guerrero has that information.
Okay, so maybe if we can provide that information to the body, I very much appreciate that.
Absolutely, Senator.
Is there anything else? Hold on 1 second. I think those are my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Senator Amanda Sheldon, do you have any questions? No questions. Senator Vice Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, Jesus Masi, Mr. Chair, and as I was listening to the previous speaker, maybe I'd like to direct my question to the Department of Revenue and Tax and just share a perspective that on last May, if you can remember, I made a request to the Office of Public Accountability, Auditor Cruz, for an audit on taxes collected on the military contracts. And while I'm confident that the increase in the military construction activity will yield more revenue to our island, I also know that there's even more we have yet to collect. And, you know, of course, we did receive documentation on how the trend is for the DoD construction workload here on Guam, and based on the budget fiscal year dollars. And as we look at the trend, you're going to see that it's really, really high. And I want to say that it is my understanding, Mr. Chair, if you remember, and to the panel members up there, that the Office of Public Accountability, Auditor Cruz, has been working with your office to cross-check the military contracts and business licenses. So my question, Mr. Chair, to Director Shimizu, Anti-DAF, can you share with us any progress you've made with the OPA and whether your potential findings can be seen in the projections only because as Oversight Chair of OPA, we've had extensive conversation on this, and I yield that to ask you if you can share an update with me, with our body.
Absolutely. Suzos Masi, Vice Speaker Munoz-Barnes, for that question. With regards to, of course, your request of the OPA actually is currently conducting a performance audit, but I believe it's for prime and subcontractors who have military contracts. Our team actually has an ongoing project right now. We're doing what we call a compliance review. And as you know, just to kind of share some information or background on military contractors in general. And when we talk about military contractors, a lot of times the term contractor can have many meanings. So, of course, the contractor could be a contractor, as we know that a general contractor, contractor that may do construction, but there are also just people who have contracts who can also be called contractors. USAspending.gov was a website that was actually referenced in an audit by the Inspector General that occurred back, I think, about almost a decade ago now. In the IG's report, they did identify that as a source for us to determine what projects are being our Guam source, and so that is the basis for us to that we utilize to determine what the population of businesses is that are doing business for Guam that have military contracts. With regards to contractors, though, I wanted to share, I know there's a lot of questions about what taxes apply and how this all works, and I did have a conversation with one of the senators earlier regarding this. All businesses generally are required to get a license to do business on Guam, a business license. However, contractors do not get a business license with the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Contractors who do construction and other work like that, they get licensed by the Contractors Licensing Board. However, there was a AG opinion that was issued, I think in 1993, which stated that there is an exception for contractors, and not domestic contractors, only foreign or off-island contractors that do work exclusively with the military. And so that means that those foreign or off-island contractors that do business with the military, they're not required to get a license with the Contractors Licensing Board. They still, however, are required to register with the Guam Department of Revenue and Taxation's Business License Branch. Our tax team did actually meet with some of the Joint Region Mariana's team members to discuss the process. and what it is that is shared with the contractors that are awarded military contracts. And of course, contractors are advised to and perhaps even provided with information that they must comply with the laws of Guam. However, of course, the compliance with those laws, to include tax laws, really relies or is dependent upon the work that we do here at the Department of Revenue and Taxation. But I'm happy to say that we are undergoing and we are actively working on a compliance review. Our team has actually sent out hundreds of notices to federal contractors. Again, what we did was we looked at usaspending.gov. We also reconciled those taxpayers against the database that we have of tax filers to come up with a list of contractors who we don't see that are filing to determine whether or not they are in compliance. Now, it's an ongoing project, but but what I'm happy about is that we're actually working on it. I don't believe that it's a long-term project that's going to be ongoing. There is a lot that's involved. And I also want to share, I know a lot of times we do hear about these awards, these 60 or 20 or huge dollar amount awards that are awarded. One thing that we don't have the benefit of knowing is when the payments are made or when the contract is actually beginning. So for example, although there might be a $20 million project that's awarded, that project may not start for a year or two or even more. Those monies may not come in, even though, again, we're anticipating it for a while. But I can say I did talk with our supervisor in exam today, who was actually the one who is overseeing the compliance review that we're doing for federal contractors or military contractors that do business with the military for Guam. And so to ask her what her thoughts are, and at least I believe that we're working to lay a good foundation for making sure that we're going to be collecting on these. And I think it's a very good start to that. But the OPA audit is actually still ongoing, and so we don't have a conclusion or resolution to that yet, but we are working with them. But that is the status, Vice Speaker.
But is there a timeline to come back to the Revenue and Taxation as to where we're at on status with them? Are we looking at?
We actually have two ongoing, I think at least two ongoing performance audits with the public auditor. One, I believe, is on tobacco, and then the other one is this federal contractor one. They're both active. I know my team has been in communication with the public auditor's office, but I can't tell you when they will be done. I can say on our side, though, we have like the same people working on both audits to provide information to the public auditor's office. And but again, I can't tell you when it will be completed. I don't have that information.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne, or Mr. Carlson. Any added additions to Director Daphne?
None, but if my memory banks recall, that's the base operating support system carve-out that she was making reference to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ed?
Senator, I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I felt compelled to share this inquiry with Director of Revenue and Tax. As you know, when we look at the contracts, I mean, we've been working on trying to have a delineated listing of all the businesses out there and what may or may not be escaping our island. And there was a commitment from all the parties that we would come to this, and that authorization to work closely with the OPA was provided, and we continue to facilitate that. OPA has been working closely with me. I wanted to bring it up to the forefront because I think it's important as we look at the trend of the monies, I mean, the workload and the construction that will be done here. We know that even past 2024, 25, 26, 27, 28, and even 2029, there will be large construction contracts from the military buildup still here. So those are revenues, new revenues, that we haven't even ascertained into coming in or even getting the projections there. And I felt that it was really important, and knowing that we've been working on this since the inception of last term, and then also this term, knowing that the audits and everything were out there, getting a clearer picture from Rev and Tax, I think that it's important to know that we know that we're up in the millions, and as far of what is due to us. And I don't know if you want to add anything else, Director Daphne, on this.
Right, and one thing I did in discussion with our supervisor for exam today, we talked about the possibility of expanding further our exam group, so that way we can have specific individuals who are actually focused specifically on this, because again, a lot of times it's a matter of resources. We have the same people that are working on our regular examinations or audits that are working on these projects. But again, you know, Vice Speaker, thank you, because really we have been working to try to lay the foundation. So as we see the growth in the military build up, you know, we'll have more confidence that we're capturing these taxes from these organizations.
C.J. Mossy, and Mr. Chair, I would like to also note for the record that I'm very hopeful that sooner than later that we will have, because of this collaboration, that we will have an update working closely with the OPA. As you know, that this was one of his major babies when he was here in this August body, and a commitment that he said he would continue to follow through. So, Mr. Chair, that's the only question I have for this round. But I do know that after my team gets together and gives me an update on some of the provisions that are part of this, that I will go ahead and bring it back to this body. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak briefly on this. Sana Masi.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Brown, do you have any questions? And my colleagues, I know you're still waiting for more documents, information from DRT.
I
Senator
actually
Brown.
wanted to get some of that. I know Senator Ada also requested documents. Mr. Chair, in all fairness, can we get that before we move forward? Because that might influence the other questions that I want to ask. Is that something that we can get? Is it today, or is it something we can get before we reconvene on Monday? Or
I don't think we'll be able to get it today, but I know they're still putting it together. But I would highly recommend that maybe we'll recess and allow them a chance to put it together, hopefully today, the weekend.
that would be nice.
They got
'cause
money
then
for
it would
overtime, they
allow-
can complete that document.
It would allow
gathering.
us to look over, then we can help, you know, sharpen our questions, and then, you know, we can get through it.
All right, so at this time, Committee of the Whole will go into recess until Monday at 10 a.m. All right, thank you.